How's it going, and welcome back to building a deep learning framework from scratch. Today I'm going to walk you through one of the final steps of the whole project where we're going to actually turn this framework into a pip installable library. That way we can kind of script against it or actually run some of the commands from the command line without necessarily having to copy and paste the code to wherever we're working and to the data we're working on and the projects we're working on. So let's go ahead and get started. So if we go ahead and look, I've actually taken the data script, the model script, and the train script that we had previously, and I placed them inside two subfolders, each of which is called framework. So inside of, we kind of made a big base folder framework and then a subfolder framework, and then inside the subfolder we put those three scripts. And then along with those scripts, three scripts, what I'm going to do is create an init file. This allows us to actually initialize our Python library, and we'll be able to pip install it and then also load the whole module in. And then underneath the parent framework library, we're going to go ahead and create a setup.py script. So now that you have those three things set up, go ahead and walk through how to actually make it into a pip installable library. So that's kind of what the setup.py script is for. We're going to go ahead and from setup tools, import the setup function. If you don't have this installed, I think you might have to pip install it. I don't think it comes already installed on Python, but that's pretty simple. You just go ahead and pip install setup tools. Once you've done that, then you can go ahead and run setup. And then here is where we kind of designate what all goes into the library. So we're going to go ahead and name it the DL framework. Maintainer equals man v machine, so me. Version, go ahead and name it just 1.0. Description, oops. So it's a deep learning framework built on Keras API. And then for the packages that we want to go along with this library, we want to go ahead and grab the framework package, which is this subfolder with all of our scripts in it. And then go ahead and pass. The next thing we're going to have to do is pass the install requirements. So these are any of the library dependencies that we use in this base functionality that we're going to also want to make sure that when people pip install this library or you pip install this library that it goes ahead and installs or checks to make sure you also have these other libraries installed. So these would be NumPy, Pandas, and TensorFlow. And then here we're actually going to create what is an entry point. It's called an entry point. So I want to be able to, this stems from wanting to be able to run the training script and run the training function from the command line with any config file, regardless of which directory I'm in, right? I don't want to have to come back to this base directory with all my base code and where this library is installed, right? And in order to run things there, because it could get pretty messy having to bring all of my different data sets to the same place and all that stuff, right? So I'm going to go ahead and make an entry point and add a console script so that we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so entry point equals a dictionary. So then here we go, we have a console script. Okay, console scripts, and want to go ahead and call this functionality that we're going to create, I want to call it train model. And what I want that to tie into is framework.train and then the main function. And that's it. So this basically, as long as you have this setup.py script, you have all of your scripts and the init, the initialization.py file in your package, you can go ahead and pip install this, which we will get into in a minute. But before we do that, I do want to say, since we're tying into this main function, if you followed along previously, I never actually defined a main function in the training script. What we did previously is when we called the script, is then we would call this command line runner and get the config file loaded into a Python dictionary and then pass that dictionary onto our run training function. So in order to kind of work around this and work with the entry point, all I did is basically wrap all of that functionality inside of a main function. And then now when we call this script, it'll call that main function itself, or when we call that entry point, it'll call this main function. Okay, so next thing we do is we want to make sure we pull up our console, activate your Conda environment that you would like to install this on. Mine's going to be my tense environment. Go ahead and check, make sure we're in the right spot. And then we're going to go ahead and run this command. So basically what this is doing is it's calling Python pip install, and then it's -E for editable mode, and then the period as in install everything. So what this is doing is it allows, the editable mode allows you to make adjustments to the library and then those adjustments are automatically updated into the package without you having to reinstall it. So this is really useful, especially for this particular package in this particular library, because as you know, the data script and the model script, you're going to have to add in your task specific functions to those. And in order to not have to continually re-pip install the library, having an editable mode allows you to add those functionalities in and then go ahead and use them right away. So go ahead and, okay, ran into a problem here. Give me 1 second to figure out that error. Okay, so I was able to figure out the error. Basically, I just forgot to save the files. So I went ahead and saved the files, and here we go. We should have this working. There we go. So it's installing the library. It's checking to make sure that we have all of the required installs or the required libraries. And then there you go. Successfully installed the DL framework. Okay, so to test to make sure that our entry point is working properly, I'm going to go ahead and call that function train model from the command line with our Conda environment activated. So basically what this does is it just imports and loads that library, and then it calls that function. Here we get an error. It says train the following arguments are required config, which is good. That means it's working properly. We didn't pass a config file to it, so we should expect there to be an error, but the fact that it was able to run this command is good. So this is all nice. However, if you don't want to go back and edit the actual library when you're working on new projects and you just want to script against this library, right? I'll walk you through how to do that. So let's say I have a new problem. I don't want to go back and find where I downloaded, and I don't want to edit the data and add the models in here, right? What I can do is go ahead and make a new training script. And if, say, I want to use the same run training functionality, but I want to, do a new project, I can go ahead and import all the new libraries I'll need to do my project and do my experiment. And then I can go ahead and import from framework.train, import run training. So that way I can go ahead and import that either run training, or I can go ahead and import main, and I can create a new script. So here, basically, you can define your new loading functions or your new TensorFlow dataset functions and your new models. And then you can go ahead and do like we did before and go ahead and load your config file in and pass it to the run training function, and it should work properly. So just to kind of highlight that, I'm going to go ahead and open up a Python terminal here. So, and then from framework.train, import run training. And there you go. There's no error thrown, which means now we have access to that run training function. So now that you've followed along and worked through this entire series on building up this framework, you should at least have a basic kind of structure to a framework that will allow you to plug into it, make adjustments, You could even translate this into some other type of deep learning or machine learning language like PyTorch, right? Convert it into like the PyTorch language or the API. The whole idea here is that you kind of have at least the base structure and the base foundation on how to go about structuring your different machine learning and deep learning experiments, and a way to generalize kind of the workflow so that between experiments and between problems, you don't have to continually rewrite your code, right? You can create kind of a base library of functionality that can be used across the different things, and helps, for one, to be a little more organized, helps you be a lot more productive, and allows you to not necessarily focus so much on the programming aspects of things, but can allow you to focus on the data science side of things, focusing on the running the experiments, understanding the data, understanding the architectures, so that abstracts some of the software engineering things away from it. So this is probably going to be the last video on this series. I'm going to be doing more on the framework and on machine learning, deep learning as a whole, but I'm going to kind of get away from walking through building up the framework and start diving more into actual problems. And I might, highlight some of the additions I add to this framework as we go through those problems. I might not, but either way, as we kind of go forward, you'll be able to see, this put into play, and able to see how you go about working on some of these bigger projects and applying the software that we've written. So so far, I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you got something meaningful out of it, and I hope you stay tuned for what's coming next. So see you next time.